Breaking news today on one of Donald Trump's most fiercely loyal allies in his administration. Trump has ousted his Attorney General, Pam Bondi, after growing increasingly disappointed with her job performance. Trump says Bondi will move into a job in the private sector and that Deputy AG Todd Blanche will now serve as the acting AG. This news comes on day 34 of an unpopular war of choice, an unhinged Oval Office address, a public clamoring for the release of the Epstein files, 8 million Americans taking to the streets to express their discontent with this president. But the president's focus? Ballrooms, loyalty tests, and retribution. Well, Bondi did everything she could during her time as the nation's top law enforcement officer to do Donald Trump's bidding. What tipped the scale, according to MS Now's reporting, is that Trump grew, quote, frustrated with Bondi's inability to successfully prosecute several individuals whom he considers political enemies and has argued should face criminal charges. It is not that Bondi did not try to deliver Trump's revenge. When Trump directed her to prosecute his perceived enemies in a public truth social post back in September, she took her marching orders. But here's what happened to the most high-profile cases. There was the failed attempt to prosecute former FBI Director James Comey when the case was thrown out by a judge. There were 3 failed attempts to indict or prosecute New York Attorney General Letitia James. And a grand jury rejected an attempt to charge 6 sitting Democratic lawmakers. And then, of course, there was her handling of the Epstein files. As the New York Times reports, quote, Trump's support for Bondi has steadily eroded since last summer, when her early stumbles in managing the release of the Epstein files created a political liability for Mr. Trump among a segment of his supporters. Despite her ouster, the House Oversight Committee is vowing to still hold her accountable. Ranking member Robert Garcia saying this in a statement today, quote, Attorney General Pam Bondi has been leading a White House cover-up of the Epstein files. She has weaponized the Department of Justice to protect Donald Trump and put survivors in harm's way by exposing their identities. She will not escape accountability and remains legally obligated to appear before our committee under oath. She must answer for her mishandling of the Epstein files and the special treatment she has given Ghislaine Maxwell. As for who might replace Bondi on a more permanent basis, 3 sources familiar with the matter tell MS Now that EPA Administrator, former Republican Congressman Lee Zeldin, is on a short list. But it's not clear that any other person in that post can and will have more success with Bondi's failures. The second high-profile firing of a Trump cabinet official in less than a month is where we begin this hour. Our White House reporter, Laura Barron Lopez, joins us from the North Lawn. Senior investigative reporter Carol Leonnig is here. Plus, former assistant special agent in charge at the FBI, National Security and Intelligence Analyst Michael Feinberg is with us as well. Carol, talk us through how this all unfolded.
You know, what's been happening the last few days has been pretty interesting. We've been chasing this tip that Donald Trump had tired to the degree with Pam Bondi that he was going to remove her. And of course, last night we were reported, and again this morning, my colleagues on the White House team, Laura and Jake, were able to confirm that not only was he considering removing her, but he had informed Pam Bondi that he was removing her. I really like the way you began this segment because it's important to remember all the things Pam Bondi has done that set her completely apart from any prior attorney general. And that is her willingness to do exactly what Donald Trump sort of orders up in terms of prosecuting people or bringing charges against people that he views as his enemies. And none of those efforts thus far have been that successful. Grand juries have decided that they don't see the evidence for crimes on behalf of some of the people Donald Trump has targeted and Pam Bondi has willingly gone along with. And judges have actually intervened in cases where the evidence is also sorely, in their opinion, lacking. But really, the Epstein case is also a huge contributor to this. And we have to remember that Donald Trump lost supporters and friends and fans among, a dark conspiracy theory community that believed the Justice Department was hiding important information about Epstein and his special clients. Well, it turns out what the Department of Justice was mostly concealing, according to MS Now, were documents that seemed to implicate or suggest that there were witnesses who claimed they had been sexually harmed by not just Epstein, but by Donald Trump. Those are the only documents we know of at this point that were withheld by this Justice Department for a period of time, and that did not help Donald Trump very much.
Laura, if all of this has been simmering for months now, why now? Talk to me about the timing.
Yeah, Alicia, I mean, I think that part of it was that the president was starting to really consider other people, and this had been building for so much time, all the way going back to last summer. He'd been hearing, as Carol laid out, for months from people that are close to him, from allies who come to the White House and talk to him, that they were not happy with Bondi's handling of the Epstein files and just her public persona. I think that a lot of it also had to do with some of her hearings, her public testimony recently to Congress, where the president wasn't necessarily happy with that as well. And, you know, of course, the president being a master of changing media narratives, there is some consideration that, you know, while the public is focused on Iran and rising gas prices, that things like this, shaking up his cabinet even further, could draw attention away from that. But ultimately, you know, there are people that the president is considering, and he had started to talk to over the last few days now, the Republicans and other allies that he was close to, about those potential replacements. And what one source familiar with the president's thinking told me was that when the president starts to do that, that means he's about to move on this. And really, within a matter of days, he did. And he was starting to talk to people about Lee Zeldin, the EPA administrator, someone who he has been very happy with at the EPA, and with Zeldin carrying out his deregulation of many policies that would fight greenhouse gas emissions and climate change. He also is considering people like Jeanine Pirro, someone who is also incredibly close to the president, a very loyal supporter, who also denied the 2020 election results, like Pam Bondi. She's the current U.S. attorney for the District of Columbia, and Pirro, sources told me, as well as Jake Traylor, is pitching herself for the job and is someone who is being considered for it as well. So there are a number of other people that we could go through that sources have told me, Carol and others, that the president is considering, whether it's Alina Habba, who's the former U.S. attorney for New Jersey and was disqualified from that role by an appeals court, or also Senator Eric Schmidt of Missouri, who is as well potentially on this short list here. Alicia.
It is interesting, Michael Feinberg, to imagine what those pitches must be, given that the president's discontent with his current attorney general was that she was not sufficiently loyal, that she was not able to bend an institution to her will. Regardless of who they put in that role, will they be able to carry out this president's agenda?
Not in the immediate future, and hopefully not ever, because the bulwark that has been blocking people like Pam Bondi from being successful in going after the president's foes is our judicial system. It is judges at the magistrate, district court, and appellate court level. It is grand juries. I would lightly disagree with you that she did not bend DOJ to her will. Mm-hmm. In my opinion, she didn't just bend it, she broke it. She has seen the largest outflow of talent from the Justice Department in United States history. Some of it has come from firings, some of it has come from resignations, and some of it has come from people who retired much earlier than they ever expected to because they couldn't take working in that environment. And she turned the Justice Department into the exact opposite of what it is supposed to be. She has let the innocent go free, whether it is individuals credibly charged with things like other Bush administration officials who are alleged to have taken bribes, or ICE officers who have killed Americans in city streets. And she has allowed the innocent to be punished, whether it's Letitia James or Jim Comey. We're in the upside down with what the Justice Department is supposed to be doing.